I'm actually doing a giveaway. For more information, just wait until the end of the video. Thank you. Number 10. Harry Gleeson. Moll McCartney was murdered in Ireland in 1940. Moll was well known in town as a prostitute. She had 7 children in the course of her business. Harry Gleeson discovered Moll's body in his uncle's field. She had been shot twice in the face. When questioned, the former denied knowing who she was, perhaps from a simple desire not to be associated with the notorious woman. However, the lie brought him under suspicion and was charged with the murder. It suggested that he had fathered one of her children and killed her to stop her from talking. However, there was no evidence for this. Witnesses came forward who could refute this claim, but they were never called at trial. The only thing that linked Harry Gleeson with the Moll McCartney was he discovered her body. And the only damning evidence against him was the fact that he had lied about knowing a prostitute. Harry Gleeson was convicted and executed in 1941. Number 9. John Perry. In 1660, William Harrison and estate manager went to Cavan, England on foot to Kilgrams as his way normal route. He never returned after a time. His servant John Perry and Perry's son went out in search for their master, but the only trace they could find was their employer's hat, shirt, and collar, which Perry claimed that they had found abandoned along the road. The items were stained with blood. John Perry was arrested for Harrison's murder. When questioned, shall we say somewhat forcefully, he accused his own mother and brother of being the real murderers, saying that they had killed William Harrison for his money. At the trial, John Perry acknowledged that the idea to kill Harrison has been his own, which made him just as guilty. He went into great detail about who had done the killings and what they said and done by each other. However, the judge refused to find them guilty of the murder without a body. Eventually, a second judge decided that they could be charged without a corpse, and given Perry's claims, the entire Perry family was found guilty and hanged in 1661. John Perry was hanged last after being forced to watch the executions of his mother and brother. In 1662, the so-called victim had returned. William Harrison told a wild story of having been attacked by pirates who robbed him, chained him up, threw him into a pit. His tale was clearly a complete fabrication, but wherever he had been and whatever he had been doing, he certainly not being murdered on the road and cabin by John Perry or any of his unfortunate family. Number 8. Timothy Evans. Timothy Evans moved in a top floor flat at Notting Hill, London in 1948 with his wife Beryl and their daughter. The ground floor was occupied by a man named John Christie. Timothy Evans, he found it very difficult to support his family, and when his wife found out that she was pregnant again, it was decided that she would have an abortion, despite being illegal. On November 30, 1949, Evans went to the police after some confusion in his story. He had eventually told them that his neighbor had performed an abortion on his wife and that she had died as a result. He also said that his daughter had been taken and given to an unknown person to look after, and that Chrissy was refusing to let him see her. When the police searched his house, they had found the bodies of both his daughter and wife barely concealed in the wash house. They had both been strangled. Evans was said to have confessed to the killings of his wife, though it was later proved that most of his confession was written by the police and presented to the illiterate man to sign. There was no true evidence. Evans insisted that John Christie had committed the crime. However, it took the jury just 40 minutes to convict Timothy Evans. He was hung on March 9, 1950. 3 years later, the police discovered a number of bodies at the place. 3 years later, the police discovered a number of bodies at John Christie's place. There was a woman propping up in John Christie's garden's fence. Some of these bodies would certainly have been at the property at the time the police searched the place, but it seemed they never looked further than the wash house. John Christie was hanged in 1953 for the murders of at least 8 people. Number 7. Derek Bentley had a mental age of an 11-year-old. In November 1952, Bentley, 19, and his 16-year-old friend Christopher Craig broke into a warehouse. When the alarm was triggered as the police arrived, the two young men tried to hide on the roof. Soon after, the Fairfax climbed on top of the roof and chased them, grabbing Bentley. Bentley broke free, and as he ran, he said to have called out the fatal words of "Let him have it." Christopher Craig fired his gun wildly, hitting the wounded Fairfax. However, his wounds were not substantial since he was soon on his feet again. DC Fairfax recaptured Bentley and flattened him with a punch before arresting him. Some 15 minutes after Bentley was taken into custody, PC Sidney Miles kicked the door open on top of the roof where Christopher Craig was still holed up, whereupon Craig shot him in the head. Craig continued to fire at the police until he ran out of bullets. Then he leaped from the roof, breaking his spine in the fall. At the trial, the prosecution alleged that Bentley egged Craig on by yelling, "Let him have it," while the defense maintained he was trying to get Craig to give up the gun. Both men were found guilty of murder, even though Bentley was under arrest and no longer on the roof at the time of the shooting. Since Craig was only 16, however, he could not be executed. Derek Bentley was hanged in 1953 and was granted a limited pardon in 1993. Number 6. Joe Artie. Joe Artie had a mental capacity of a 5-year-old and an IQ of 46. His greatest delight was playing with his toy trains and eating ice cream. In 1936, Artie was said to have confessed to the brutal rape and murder of a 15-year-old Dorothy Drain, as well as the rape and attempted murder of her 12-year-old sister. He was said to have bludgeoned them with a hatchet as they slept. It is certain that Joe would not have understood what he was confessing to. He could not have read the statement that he signed, and it's certainly that he could not mentally capable of the murders. However, he was held on death row for 3 years, and his execution, where his favorite pastime was playing with his toy train and his last meal was ice cream. Joe Artie was executed at the age of 23. A friend of the girl's father, Frank Aguilar, later confessed to the crime. He had never even met Joe Artie. Number 5. George Stinney. In 1944, George Stinney became the youngest person to be executed in the United States in the 20th century. George was convicted of the murder of 2 white girls in South Carolina. The whole trial is said to have lasted less than 3 hours and presented no evidence and almost no eyewitness testimony. He was convicted by an all-white jury after deliberation which lasted only 10 minutes. The 14-year-old was prevented from seeing his family, friends, or legal counsel when he was interrogated. It is claimed that he was so frightened that he would have said anything the police asked him to do. There was no evidence linking him to the dead girls, except that Stinney and his sisters were the last people to see the girls alive. Stinney was arrested, tried, and executed all within the space of 3 months. He was too small to fit in the electric chair and had to sit on a Bible to enable the straps to place around him. His sisters and the rest of the family campaigned tirelessly to clear his name. Number 4. George Kelly. In 1949, a cinema manager and his assistant were murdered during a robbery in Liverpool when a man burst into the manager's office as the takings were being counted and shot them both. The gunman then fled, leaving the cash untouched. The police were under great pressure to solve the crime and had already interviewed 65,000 people when they received an anonymous letter that pointed the finger at George Kelly as a murderer and another man, Charles Conley, as a lookout. After the first trial, the 2 men were tried together and the jury failed to reach their verdict. The 2 men were subsequently tried separately. Charles Connolly pled guilty to robbery and conspiracy. George Kelly continued to deny any involvement in the crime, but was convicted of the double murder and was hanged in 1950. In 2003, the convictions of both men were overturned and the original verdict was declared unsafe. Number 3. Thomas and Meeks Griffin. In April 1913, 73-year-old John Q. Lewis, a Confederate veteran of the Civil War, was murdered in his own home in South Carolina. Lewis went on to have a relationship with a married black woman, and immediate suspicions fell on her husband. However, possibly in order to avoid scandal, it is claimed that police did not thoroughly investigate the angle, despite the fact that when officers went to question the husband, he was found with his bags packed and was wearing blood-stained trousers. Another man was arrested in connection with the crime. At first, he claimed to be acting as a lookout while the husband killed John Lewis. Later, possibly after persuasion from the police, Stevenson implicated Thomas and Meeks Griffin instead, on the promise of a reduced sentence. The Griffin brothers were the wealthiest black men in Chester County. They owned 138 acres of land and were popular in the community. It is believed that they were implicated because they could afford a proper defense lawyer, and given that they were innocent, it assumed that they would have been acquitted. However, the trial judge was said to be hostile to the Griffin brothers, possibly due to their elevated positions, their wealth, and their race, and after an extremely biased trial, the brothers were found guilty and executed swiftly. They were pardoned in 2009, the first pardon ever granted in South Carolina. Number 2. Tang Xinxian. In 1989, Tang Xinxian was executed for the murder of Shai. Shai had disappeared 1 month before the dismembered body was found in a river in China and was identified as a missing woman. The dismembered body was said to be cut in a professional way, and since Tang Xinxian was a butcher, he was suspected. It was further alleged that the two had a sexual relationship, and Tang suspected Shai of stealing from him. At his trial, it was said that Tang had confessed to the crime and his own initiative. That's odd, as 4 years after Shang's execution, Shai returned to her hometown. She said that she had been swindled and sold as a wife in another province. In 2005, she urged authorities to undergo Shang's conviction. When she asked about her relationship with Tang, she replied that she had never even met him. Tang was declared innocent in 2006. Number 1. Miles Joyce. In 1882, John Joyce, his mother, his wife, and 2 children were brutally murdered in their home in Ireland. Miles Joyce was the one of 10 men charged with the murder. The men were all due to stand trial, but 2 of the men made a deal to identify the perpetrators. Miles Joyce, of no relation to the victims, were one of the men implicated. Joyce spoke only Irish but was not given the service of an interpreter. At his trial, and never understood a word until the verdict, which was hopefully translated from English to Irish for his benefit. He was said to have protested his innocence, but in a language that the court could not have understood. The jury considered the evidence for only 6 minutes before returning to the guilty verdict. 2 of the other convicted men admitted their guilt and state that Joyce had no part in the crime, but it was deemed too late to stop the execution. Miles Joyce was hanged in December 1882. As he was brought to the scaffold, Joyce said, in Irish of course, "I will see Jesus Christ in a little while. He was too unjustly crucified." The Irish Parliament recognized that the miscarriage of justice had been taking place and issued an unconditional pardon of Miles Joyce in 2008. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you guys like these commentaries or recommend some topics you want me to do about, just comment down below and subscribe. And thank you very much. For the giveaway, I'm actually doing a giveaway once I hit 100 subscribers. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And